If fiat collapses, then you're looking at probably an 80% reduction in asset values worldwide, because basically the credit portion of the currency stream disappears, and you're only left with what's called the floating currency. The cash part of the cash cycle. There's credit cash, and then there's cash. And what the Fed's doing now, they're trying to put more cash into the system because they see what's coming.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, Bob Kudla, TradeLikeAGenius.com. When we spoke in our pre-interview here, I think the name of this thing might be Silver and Food Go Together. So in our last iteration when we were talking, it was more about how the end of the year is starting to come in with higher food prices, what we're trying to think about for the future here in 2020, some of the ideas, how we both see the economy, civilization cycle, as well as other larger cycles in the heavens, literally coming to fruition, things we haven't seen since the 1400s. I want to talk about the Great Conjunction today, tectonic movements, as we're starting to see more earthquakes across Western United States. Cascadia is always going off during grand solar minimums. So you have to ask yourself, how much do these intertwine between tectonic events, heavenly celestial events, and then our lives here on Earth, and then that further dissected into the economy cycle in itself, which has different cycles that overlap on top of cycles. So where's the true value in your skill sets and also things that you can own to get us through this next year? Because I'm going to stick with it. I'm staying with my prediction. I stay with it. I will not deviate from this at all. 2021 is the year that everybody wakes up to this grand solar minimum conundrum that we're facing in 2021 harvest season. So we have from then until now, that amount of time until everybody's awoken. And then what happens? How's the world going to move from there? So Bob, I appreciate you coming on today. TradeLikeAGenius.com. I'm going to leave all the links in the description box below. If you want to learn how to trade, follow Bob. I'll let you explain what you have for different trigger algorithms and different automated ways that you can take advantage of movements in the market with just simple buy and sell orders that come to you either through text, or you can actually watch it through TradingView live on the screen there. But we're going to try to run through a bunch of topics today for the next hour. Bob, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining me. TradeLikeAGenius.com. If you've never traded before and want to take advantage of these types of profits every day in the market, I urge you to sign up for one of many Trade Genius online educational courses. Use the promo code HOLIDAY for 50% off non-bundled items. Crypto, options, ETFs, and the traditional markets. And on to the interview with Bob Kudla from TradeLikeAGenius.com.
Look, in America, California passed a law that if you steal less than $1,000, it's a misdemeanor. So people are rampaging through these clothing stores now and just walking out with stuff, and they basically come in groups of 20 or 30, and they steal and they go. And the police are overwhelmed. They're not going to chase down somebody who stole $150 sneakers, but it's causing grief here. And that's what's going to happen with food too. So you just need to be smart about these things. And it's kind of sad that we have to talk about this, but people are absolutely clueless, Dave. They think they can just run to the store. How many hurricanes have people gone through where they get to Home Depot and they get to Albertsons and they find out there's nothing on the shelf and you can't get plywood. You need to have that stuff now. And even if you're stuck in a city, you better have a cabinet full of food, and a can opener, and you'll be able to make it through with a hot pot.
Yeah, that's all you're going to need. And, thinking about water as well, because you can have all the food you want, you can have all the propane you need, but without the water as well, you're going to need some of that. And I agree, if you're in the city, get out of there. When I was talking, I was thinking more of residential or farming community, something like this. You're going to need to be a little further out, because imagine if there's a flash mob that runs through a supermarket 20, 30 people, how much food could they grab off of a shelf and run away with? And then if everybody was doing it repeatedly through the day, I mean, what are the choices of these supermarkets? Are they going to continue to stay open with armed guards inside there, or they're going to close their doors? It's going to be it could be a choice C probably, where they have people going through like, okay, 2 of you can go in now, something like this. Let me see your cash first. Kind of like getting checked if you're going into, I don't know, a venue or an event. But the things that are portending with the massive amount of cycles overlapping and the massive signs we're seeing, not in these earthquakes, Cascadia, just an FYI here, through history, John Casey's book, Upheaval, is a really good book to understand. When they get these quakes, everything delivered by pipeline. Now, Bob, you talked about trucks rolling over passes and trucks delivering things. An enormous amount of water, oil, gas, and these types of things are delivered by pipeline. Now, these pipelines would rupture during this time too, and anything coming from the east into California would be cut off in a second. So think about the reduction of pipeline capacity going inbound. They're talking about freeway, maybe not collapses, but the bridges would pull away enough where you wouldn't be able to travel by road because your car couldn't transit the gap between where things were separated on freeways and bridges. And then also these Cascadia Range volcanoes routinely. Now, this is just an average. And again, John Casey's book, he did all the research on it going back 8,000 years. And they found the different ash deposits, especially over near Idaho and whatever. There's more. It always stayed pretty regional over to Montana, Idaho, this kind of area. And that was kind of the ash edge, if you will, is how far it blew. St. Helens was an unusual one. But they usually find 3 Cascadia eruptions happening during any one grand solar minimum. And they also found that they were happening at the same time. So you get 3 erupting volcanoes all happening at the same time. And with that, there'd be less pressure billowing up. But imagine 3 erupting volcanoes. I mean, that'd be a steady ash flow up 30, 40,000 feet and just dropping out regionally. St. Helens was a big one. And that was so much pressure by itself. Think about the amount of pressure under one single eruptive area. Now divide that over 3 areas, and then the amount of pressure coming out would be less. And that was the thing. It was more just like a pressure relief on the Cascadia Range. But expect when you start to see the first one volcano start to erupt in the Cascadia Range, you're definitely into the zone where we're past the time to prepare, that there's no more time left. Like Cascadia seems to be one of the first triggers, and you're already seeing it with the earthquakes. Again, how contaminated will the water sources become if there's a bunch of ash drifting off into it? So you might think you can go to your friend's swimming pool and get water. You can go to your local lake and get water. Well, they found in South America, even fish farming was just completely destroyed because the amount of ash in the water killed all the fish. None of the animals could graze. Almost all the herds died because they couldn't eat the ash-covered grass, ash-covered plants for me and you. You're going to have more water to wash it. But if that water's already contaminated with a bunch of microfine ash in it, how quickly is that going to clog your filters? You might have all the drip through filters you want to have, but how quickly is that going to clog everything up? And how many times will you have to, remediation measures of re-rinsing it and trying different things? And your food, you're going to have to wash incredibly. It's hard to get ash. Volcanic ash is very difficult to get off. And if you're in any kind of bean plant leaves, that stuff's going to stick right in there. I don't even know if it's going to be edible for human consumption for some time. Volcanic ash is something nobody's talking about on how difficult it is to deal with it. Not only with your air masks and your respiration, water contamination, food contamination, and just general itchiness around your body, which opens your skin more, where more bacteria can get in there, and we got all these health issues because of that. And if systems are down, and you're in a volcanic ash area, and I tell you what, this Cascadia is a huge amount of the Northwest U.S., including parts of BC, Canada, all the way down into Northern California, and we got all the way over to Idaho, Montana. That whole area just gets dusted with ash liberally for weeks and months. So, and then if all of these other things are going down as well, it's going to be, there's nobody coming to help you. I tell you what, there will be nobody coming to help you. You will be on your own with your community, and you're going to have to get through it. And you're going to be begging and praying that those eruptions stop so you can get fresh water. So where's your well? Do you know where any artesian springs are? Do you know where the springs are coming out of a hillside somewhere? Do you know where your local springs are where you can go with your bottles and just go fill it from water coming out of our earth? Because standing water bodies in any kind of emergency, we've seen this again and again and again. When there's an earthquake, a lot of times things will fracture and lakes will disappear, rivers will disappear, water bodies just disappear into the earth, and they're left with a dry, barren, what was former empty lake bed with fish flopping around. Can you imagine if they're near Baja, if there was a small little crack, like an 8-foot deep, and water rushed into where you're talking about, Palm Springs? That would be an economy-ending event because everything there is so high in real estate value. But just think about wiping out these several areas underwater. How long would it take to build levees to pump them out? I don't know if they ever would. It would be a complete write-off. And if this is what we're looking at for just a small part of the nation, how's the rest of the country going to be affected by that? There's so many things moving forward economy-wise that you're going to have to protect your families by yourself. The message is understand the problem so you can come up with the solutions, but be real about it. If you're going to put your head in the sand and be like, don't talk about it, it's too tumultuous to talk about. I'm sorry, you're not going to be around to talk any further after these events happen because you didn't prepare. And these are the years now, 2020 and 2021. We're going to have more change with this grand solar minimum. So these next 2 to 3 years, because we're entering into it, it's going to be the most change. You already see our atmosphere doesn't know how to adjust to these new changes with the weakening magnetosphere, new jet streams in different flows, cloud patterns. Our atmosphere does not know how to adjust. And we're just at the cusp of real atmospheric changes. The lightning and electrical ferocity hasn't really begun yet. We're starting to see a wisp of it, with the Earth trying to discharge up to the ionosphere to match the step down in the sun's charge. But all these things are really going to coalesce, like 2023 and 2024. I believe these 2 years we'll have seen nothing in the last 2,000 years, 2023 and 4. And then we're talking about the economy. I think it could be a collapse as great, bringing us back to the Roman Empire. So we're talking 2,000-year cycles of economy collapse here, as well as, food, society, and just the general workings of our planet on a 2,000-year reset cycle. So I don't know what you think about going back to the Roman collapse, if you think we might be economically heading for something that we haven't seen, not in just multi-generations, not in just multi-centuries, but there's such mismanagement and all this ejection of liquidity when all this should have been fixed after TARP came in and the trillions injected in over the last 8 years, 10 years. Where are we sitting now? We need more money? What happened? It never got fixed. So this collapse, do you think it's going to be the greatest collapse in the last how many thousand years when we really hit it and when it really starts to unwind this time? So Bob, what do you think about that collapse-wise, economy?
Yeah, well, if fiat collapses, then you're looking at probably an 80% reduction in asset values worldwide, because basically the credit portion of the currency stream disappears, and you're only left with what's called the floating currency. The cash part of the cash cycle. There's credit cash, and then there's cash. And what the Fed's doing now, they're trying to put more cash into the system because they see what's coming. But at some point, like you said, if you don't have the incomes to pay for the things, prices have to come down. Law of supply and demand has not been terminated. So, in the United States, over the next 9 years is when 2029 is when the baby boomers will be dying off faster than they're coming into 65. Into the United States population coming into 65, you'll actually start seeing a retrograde in the average age of the human in the United States. And so this next 10 years is really when we're going to have what I would call the break of the social welfare and the healthcare systems. They're either going to have to become extremely more affordable or they're going to become unavailable. And so that's something that people have to keep an eye on. And it's starting the century of that. And I think what the central banks around the world are attempting to do is they're attempting to levitate asset prices. And also what comes with that is tax revenue. A lot of people don't realize most of the tax revenue doesn't come from taxing income. It comes from taxing the capital gains and the property taxes that people have. So there's a reason why the central banks are elevating the asset values, not simply just to make the banks fat, dumb, and happy and own all the assets in the world. That's just icing on the cake for them. What they're doing is they're trying to levitate these prices and then do these occasional scares to produce transactions that are taxable. And that's what you're going to see here. You'll see one going into next year. We'll get a really good correction that will force money into the federal coffers, and they're going to try to levitate and tax. And the only thing that's going to stop it is what we talked about, you and I talked about time and time again for the last 4 years, is they can't print food. Although they're trying really hard, but they can't print it yet. And that's going to cause the Federal Reserves and the central banks around the world to stop increasing the money supply, because basically it gets to the point where it's unaffordable. And when people are starving, they tend to kill their kings. And so that's the fine line they're gonna have to weave through. Getting back to the West Coast scenario is that, governments are showing, cities in the United States are showing an inability or an unwillingness to care for their people anymore. I mean, the most basic of services are being ignored. Part of it is because they're redirecting money into these progressive, fetishes like climate change and stuff like that. Initiatives to further the chaos. But, these cities are ill-equipped to care for their people. If Mount Rainier goes off, Seattle's offline. If Mount Hood goes off, Portland's offline. If Mount Shasta goes off, San Francisco's offline. If Mono Lake goes off, LA's offline. And people don't realize that those are all the headwaters, basically active geological volcanic sites. And that's just a couple of the volcanoes. Down here in California, we're getting areas that have been quiet for many, 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 many centuries, that where you could obviously tell these were basaltic, oozings. When you look out when you travel to Las Vegas, you see the lava and the basaltic fields that are preserved because it's been a desert. Those areas are starting to heat up again, literally and figuratively. And so, the whole Western United States, is in some sort of motion here underneath the surface, and that's just California. If any of those cities go offline, the United States goes into a depression. And, you have to just look around the world: Mexico City, Tokyo, Istanbul, Rome. People don't realize Italy is a massively active fault area. So there's a lot of issues that and these things are what I would call, those are the black swans, Dave, that nobody thinks about, because a volcano and an earthquake can just show up at any point. And that's why people need to be prepared and be able to weather the storm. And that's why at Trade Genius, that's why we day trade. That's why we started this service in the first place, and you and I started talking so many years ago, is that I was that concerned about the grand solar minimum that we have to show people how they could take charge, because centralization is going to go away. You're going to have to be able to get out there and learn how to barter, learn how to trade, and learn how to make extra income from other sources, and then be able to have that income in an environment where you can then barter for things, assuming that the whole communication grid doesn't go down. Bitcoin's going to be, and those tokens are going to be a way in which people are going to conduct business. But other than that, people are going to want hard currencies. They're not going to trust fiat, and you're going to have to be in a position to be able to trade for real things, or real skills for real things, and people aren't ready for that. Now, you and I talked a lot of gloom and doom here. I'm more of a 2 standard deviation guy, a 2 sigma guy, not a 6 sigma guy, because a lot of times people get frozen for 1 in 100,000 events. But a 2 sigma are the things that we just talked about today: earthquake, volcano, social unrest, a war that shows up out of the blue that takes oil prices sky high, a sustained cold snap that drains the natural gas out of the Northeast United States. They have to ship their nat gas in because the idiots that run those northeastern states are positioning about global warming. They won't let the pipelines come into their networks. So they literally have to ship nat gas in on tankers, LNG tankers. And so if you get a big drawdown, and we had one last year, you saw the spike in natural gas last winter, it doubled and tripled overnight. When those things happen, those things are extremely disruptive. And people talk about heat killing people, cold kills people a lot faster. If you're hot, you can jump in a pool or get in a shower. But if you're cold and there's no heat, there's only so many clothes you can put on before it becomes something you're not going to be able to deal with. And England sees that about every winter because they run their people ragged over there in terms of energy costs, and people just simply turn off the heat and they die. And so those are the things that we're more likely to see. We're also more likely to see a region of the world where we'll have a crop failure, and the country that has the abundance may choose not to export for political reasons or for ability to dominate. And then that'll cause chaos as well. So those are the things that are more likely to happen, Dave. Now, 6 Sigma events happen, we're all going to be heads down. But you plan for the 2 Sigma events, those events that are likely to happen over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. And the 6 Sigma things is that you can only prepare so much, but you definitely can prepare for the 2 Sigma events. And that's what we do, and that's what I do. And that's why I started a solar energy company 14 years ago, because I said, hey, people need solar energy on their homes. And I'm not a Green New Deal nut at all. I'm like, hey, you need to decentralize the grid. And I think the good that will come out of this is that we'll have a decentralized world again. People will see the utter failure of centralized governments, and things will localize again. And I think with technology, the way it's going, and some of the things that you talk about in terms of food and healthcare and stuff like that, we'll go through a dark period, but I think we'll come out of it pretty brightly in terms of where maybe our children and grandchildren will be able to live.
Preparedness. I would do a challenge for you. I'm going to recommend a website that you might want to visit. It's called findaspring.com. Like find a spring, like natural fed water source.com. Even over here in Taiwan and every nation on the planet, there's a listing for findaspring.com. Now, wherever you can find these, I would definitely mark them on your map. I would know how to get there. I would challenge you to go find all the springs in your local area. Talk to people who know where some of these springs are that maybe aren't listed. And this will give you a great peace of mind, because if you know you can go get water when others can't, or you have a fresh water source regardless of volcanic ash in the air or whatever kind of contaminants are coming down or whatever kind of conditions, if it freezes elsewhere and pipes freeze, no problem. That water is going to continue to pull out from the earth. So even just these smallest things of knowing that if these situations occur, that you already know what to do. You already have a backup plan. Look at yourself. You got solar power. You got the propane. If that doesn't work, you got the wood. I mean, the extra backups, you sleep pretty soundly at night knowing that you can take care of yourself, that you do have all these backups just in case these things happen, that we're not going into it blind. Like I have a half a gallon of milk in my fridge and that's it. People look at me here and go, why do you have all this? Wow, you got all these jars of seeds and everything. Whoa, this is like a botanist thing, or you got food under there, like lift it up, there's stored over here. Like, whoa, you can live in your house for months and months and months and never have to leave. But, take a realistic look around the world at you. And if you don't see that things just seem strange right now. And, you know, when we grew up, and if you're over 50, you know the difference between the two worlds we're living in now. You should see a stark difference in it. And I think intuitively, we're all just starting to see through the illusion of centralized planning. And the more people don't want to adopt it, the more government hard hits and comes down and tries to push you back into the system. You try to get out of the system and they discourage you from becoming self-sufficient. I mean, look at, you just go through the news feeds over the last 5-7 years, all the way back to 2013 or so. And it's been story after story of closing down local farms, closing down local dairies, closing down local farmers markets. And again, it comes down to the tax. You know, you have to buy the fee, you got to pay the fee to go to the farmers markets now. You have to pay taxes on your transactions, even if it's a barter. It's just ridiculous how the control mechanism is trying to take you away from the self-sufficiency. And if your garden in your yard gets too big, you have to apply for a business license, and you can't grow fruit in your front yard. It can only be grass and ornamentals. How dare you put a fruit tree in your front yard? That fruit could fall off and make somebody slip on the sidewalk, and you're liable. You know, I don't know why we aren't growing more community fruit trees. And I would also challenge anybody that flies by private jet, for every mile you fly, plant a community fruit tree. Plant a community fruit tree for every mile you fly.
Yeah, one of the things too is that when you talked about water, is that I have a dehumidifier in my garage that I can hook up to charcoal filtering system, and so I can generate water every day, enough for my family, through a dehumidifier that runs through the carbon filtration systems and connected to my solar system. So there are things you can do if you're stuck in a condo. You know, get a dehumidifier and get the charcoal filtration systems, and you can get potable water. The other thing too, if you know, if like for us, if there's an earthquake in the area, we immediately fill the bathtub and make sure that the bathtub is full, so that we can use that water to we have to flush the toilet, and also we have the largest solar the water heater you can. We didn't go tankless because we wanted to have water in our water heater that you can actually take and you can drink from. It's potable water because it's going through your system. You want to make sure that you have 90 days worth of medical supplies on hand. And I'm not talking this grand solar minimum, I'm just talking about the social disruption. We're going to have social disruption. The economic model is breaking down, and you want to be on the side that's going to win, and you're going to need your wits about you. And that's the other thing you need to do. You need to have your you need to have your med kit, your first aid kit, and make sure you have 90 days worth of supply on hand. And you know, if they don't have things in order by then we have bigger fish to fry. But those are things you need to think about. Don't wait till last minute on this stuff. You know, gasoline in your tank. You know, my wife is adamant that we get a half a tank. We go to the gas station, we fill it, because we live in an area where you cannot have gasoline for weeks on end. Those are things that you need to think about doing, and think about getting through 3 to 6 weeks. And the nice thing about it is, while everybody else is freaking out, you're not. You're ahead of the game. You can start thinking forward. And those are the people that are going to get ahead. You know, I like to act upon things. I don't like things to act upon me. So to the extent that I can be proactive, I am proactive. And that's what you need to have. You need to adopt that mentality. You and I both do what we do is because we have a story that we want people to understand, that what's coming in the world here, and most people are going to say, I never saw it coming. And you and I have been screaming like John the Baptist for 5 years here on this, you know, in terms of the economic cycle, which is on borrowed time. You know, it's obvious to everybody now that economic growth is dollar for dollar with new debt. And the grand solar minimum is just a simple fact. And we know what happens there. We don't need models. We just have to look at the history. And I think they're obfuscating that with models to not freak out the population. And so, but you have the information in front of you. You need to act on it. And then, we like to trade here at Trade Genius because I want to have a secondary source of income, or you want to take care of things for your family, or if none of this stuff comes to pass, being able to make some great money and go on some great vacations.